Good afternoon, and thank you for joining Strong Key for our January webinar series on delivering FIDO2 passwordless authentication for PSD2 compliance and risk mitigation. My name is Pashara Black, and I will be your moderator for today. And I am joined by Technical Project Manager Suhail North that will be presenting on the topic. The revised Payment Services Directive is ushering in a more integrated European market to make payments safer and more secure. Card issuing banks, merchants, and payment service providers are seeking to deliver frictionless, strong authentication using FIDO2 passwordless authentication. During today's webinar, we'll cover SCA requirements for PSD2 compliance, risk analysis of SCA methods, including FIDO2, 2FA, and SMS OTP, as well as FIDO2 implementation best practices for banks, merchants, and PSPs. Hi, Suhail. How's it going?
Hey, Bashara. Doing great. Can you see me okay and see the slides all right?
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. Super. Thanks for the intro, and thanks everyone for joining today. We are very excited to talk about this topic. We think we have some really helpful information that we can share. In full disclosure, we did one of these this morning at 5 a.m. for the European audience. I'm pretty confident this one will be a little more energetic and interesting. We did run a little short on time with that one, so I'm gonna keep our recaps a little quicker, and really we'll then have plenty of time to talk about really the meat of the topic, which is why FIDO protocols are the best way to comply with the PSD2 requirements, and some of the specifics of Strong Key's certified open source FIDO server. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. Bashara and I are both happy to stick around as long as the questions keep coming in. So let's jump in with a very brief introduction to who we are and why we think we can help with this. So Strong Key was founded in 2001. We turned 20 years old this year, but probably not going to have too much of a celebration until things go back to normal. Since 2001, we've been focusing on what we think are the hardest problems to solve. So a lot of our customers find us when they have looked around and really haven't found anyone capable of some of the solutions we have, or they need someone with a better ability to really integrate into their existing infrastructure. So those customers are all over the world. We support them from our offices in California and North Carolina. And when we're not helping out customers, we do work a lot with kind of the learning and education side of the community. So Strong Key has worked with NIST's National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence several times on their practice guides for various industries. We'll make sure we link to those and when we send these slides out. And what Strong Key actually focuses on, you can see at the bottom here. So everything we do relates back to these four kind of fundamental pillars, where we think that if you're encrypting your data, if you're replacing passwords with something much stronger, which we'll talk about today, if you are digitally signing that data to preserve data authenticity, and if you are managing cryptographic keys with all of the right controls and procedures and secure hardware, then we think at the bottom here, you can really make breaches irrelevant. So there are a lot of breaches making headlines right now. So we do think we have a way to help with that. And so I want to jump into our content now. We'll do a very quick recap of some of the regulations and technical requirements, but if you have more specific questions about these, please reach out to us. This will be very brief as an overview. So PSD2, we should all be pretty familiar with by now. It's the second version of the European Banking Authority's Payment Services Directive. It was published around 2015 to kind of update an initial version of the document that was from 2005. They wanted to make it a lot more current, a lot more catch up with the times of mobile transactions and all of the e-commerce that evolved over that time span. Won't be a surprise to anyone to hear that PSD2 has had some delays with enforcement. For a lot of the European Union, the full enforcement period did begin earlier this month, a couple of weeks ago actually, but for other countries, as you can see, that enforcement period will come a little bit later. The goals, you can't capture all the goals of PSD2 on one slide, but the high level ones are they wanted to really promote open banking, which is the concept of sharing financial data with organizations that didn't previously have access to it. And they thought that this sharing of data would really shift where users kind of spend their time. So previously where you could only do things from a bank website, now if a third party has that same data, you might choose to transact elsewhere. And most important for today, PSD2 does mandate what's called strong customer authentication for most transactions taking place in the EU. So a lot to look at here, but strong customer authentication you can really just think of as additional requirements when kind of the transaction authorizers can't really confirm that you are who you say you are, or that this transaction should be allowed to occur. So there's this concept of dynamic linking where you really are creating this unique authentication code specific to every transaction. So if any portion of the transaction changes, like the amount or the payment method, then that dynamic link authentication code will also change. There are a lot of ways to accomplish this dynamic linking. I did have to put one-time passcodes on the slide because the RTS, the standards document, does mention them, but we at Strong-Key don't really like to talk about OTPs. We don't think they're very secure. We have more confidence in things like digital signatures, and they left the door open for other options with this other cryptographic validity assertions category. So regardless of which way you are trying to comply with the SCA requirements, they're always going to require two of the following, two of the below. So you can provide something that you've previously registered, like a smartphone or token authenticator. That'll be the possession category because you own it. You'll have to type in a PIN or a password or maybe a one-time passcode to satisfy the knowledge requirement. And maybe if you choose to use biometrics, that'll also work. So a fingerprint scan or facial recognition. So 2 out of 3 of those, and they'll give you the green light for your transaction. So we know about PSD2, we know about SCA and what they require. What we haven't talked about yet is how does this data actually move around and reach all the different parties that need to examine it. So that's where one option that is perhaps the most popular right now, certainly dominating headlines, called 3DS2. So this is an EMVCo standard and is being propped up as a solution for the RTS specifications. Different card issuers do have kind of different flavors of their implementation of this, but at its very core, 3DS2 does require merchants to send some additional transaction data where they used to only send, you know, amount, card number, all that kind of stuff. So from a very extremely high level with 3 steps only, 3DS, you can think of it as if a merchant does send this data that that the card issuers are looking for, and the bank examines it and it all looks great, meets the requirements, then that's super. You're in the frictionless flow. There's no further user input that is required, and everything's great. At the bottom here, you can see that the frictionless flow takes on average 5 seconds in 2020. So that's super. That's super fast, and everyone would be happy. If, however, the data does not meet what the bank is looking for, then you're not eligible for the frictionless flow, and the bank has to issue a challenge for user authentication. So that's exactly where the strong customer authentication requirements come in, where you would have to scan your fingerprint or enter a passcode or something. So that, unfortunately, takes a lot longer. So this report claims that it takes around 40 seconds. So a really huge difference. Sadly, only 4% of payments in 2020 did actually qualify for the much faster version, and about 13% of customers just simply walked away from their transaction. They abandoned their shopping cart because of how difficult it was to meet these requirements. So that's where we stand. We've talked a lot about some of the problems, but now we need to figure out what we can actually do about them. So from a user experience standpoint, even though those numbers that I just mentioned from 2020 are better than they were in 2019, it's still a huge number of cart abandonment, a huge number of transactions that people are literally just abandoning because they don't want to jump through the hoops. And we can point fingers all over. We can ask whose side needs to step up and who does need to kind of pressure the other side to step up. But some of this tension and conflict has really brought about a strong push for what's known as delegated authentication. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because that probably deserves its own webinar. But you can think of delegated authentication as the shifting of both the authentication from happening in the merchant's application to somewhere higher upstream, perhaps with the wallet or the card issuer or the bank. And as a result, also shifting the liability. So merchants who participate in this can avoid being liable for chargebacks. So there's a lot of incentives built into this. So let's start talking about what we think is the best way to handle this. And to do that, we need to learn a little bit more about the Fido Alliance. Over here is a screenshot of a press release that was jointly issued by some really big names in the industries, in 3 industries actually. So EMVCo, we all know about. Fido, we're going to talk about. W3C, also a really important player. They're the ones, the World Wide Web Consortium, who actually, standardize things for internet browsers. And so when the 3 of these folks get together, you know that it's a pretty big problem that we need to address. So let's talk a little bit quickly about the Fido Alliance and what they're trying to accomplish. So the Fido Alliance was founded in 2014. It, I believe, has more than 250 members worldwide now. And specifically in the financial sector, you have folks like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, PayPal, Bank of America. So these are all organizations that have bought into the Fido mission, who are working towards using the Fido standards wherever possible, and really kind of collaborating so that we can solve these issues together. So what is that mission? The Fido Alliance in 2014 started so that companies and educational institutions could work together to replace password-based authentication with something that's stronger, easier to use, and also easier to kind of manage from the back end. So what the Fido Alliance actually does to accomplish that is to write the technical specifications that are necessary to replace passwords, to operate the certification program so that all across the world, if you have that Fido certified badge, then that means that you're gonna definitely work with anything else that also has the Fido certified logo next to it. And as we are learning, the Fido Alliance collaborates with other organizations to make sure that we can tackle some of these joint problems together. So StrongKey has been a part of the Alliance since 2014. Pretty much as soon as we heard about its existence, we jumped in because it was pretty clear that this is a really unique way to solve a lot of problems that folks are facing. StrongKey makes the world's first and only open source certified server. So there's a link here, pretty easy to type in if you want to check it out now or later. we have our FIDO server on GitHub. You can play around with it. You can follow our tutorials for how to FIDO enable your existing web applications. We have a ton of resources for anyone hoping to learn about that. So this is a slide that might be helpful to maybe take a screenshot of and look at later. But what the point is that the Fido Alliance put this together, and the result is that when you compare Fido to other options that companies could potentially use to satisfy the RTS requirements, Fido pretty clearly comes out ahead in terms of convenience, the overall security of the implementation, deployment and scalability. So there's a lot to read up on the Fido side, but we think that when you compare it to other alternatives, Fido is the most secure and can definitely be one of the most affordable. So that's a lot about Fido, but if you only remember one thing from this presentation, it should be that Fido is the best option because of how closely they work together with EMVCo. So this blue box, this headline down here, is actually a white paper that folks from both organizations, both Fido and EMVCo, they sat down together and they literally charted out what Fido data elements should go in the 3D secure payload. So the people who made the 3D secure standard are checking boxes next to what they want from the Fido data elements. These are the results. Not going to talk about them individually, other than to say that the strong key certified Fido server already has complete familiarity with these fields, and it is extremely trivial to bundle them up in the way that EMVCo is looking for. So there's not really a better way to guarantee that your solution will meet all the regulations than to use a checklist that was produced by the folks that are going to be examining compliance. So we were excited about that. Another slide, maybe take a screenshot of, but the point here is that everything in the PSD2 document, the Fido Alliance has sat down and mapped it out directly to the language used in the Fido protocol. So yellow is what PSD2 asks for, and blue is what Fido has that satisfies that requirement. So it's very easy to see from this that Fido definitely addresses everything that that PSD2 is looking for, and also has some other capabilities as well. So I do want to mention quickly that while 3DS2 is certainly one of the bigger names and one of the more prominent options being suggested as how you can comply with this, there are a couple of other large organizations that are working on alternatives. So Google is working on the secure payment confirmation framework. There's the open banking APIs that certainly have a lot of potential for solving this just as well. But regardless of which of these winds up being optimal for your organization, there's definitely a role for the Fido protocols to address a lot of these requirements, and obviously for the strong key Fido server to be an integral part of that solution. So let's talk a little bit about some of the standard features of strong keys server. So there's no multiple options of our Fido server. When you integrate the server, you get a ton of standard features, but also a lot of non-Fido related functionality that actually really strengthens the overall security infrastructure. So because of our history with working with some really large organizations, we designed our Fido server from the ground up to be ready to slot into really large organizations and kind of enterprise grade deployments. So it's not just a library that you have to throw at your developers and ask them to figure out. It is a fully functioning and certified FIDO server that you can integrate with your web applications immediately. You don't need to have a separate FIDO server for every application in your ecosystem. You can have a centralized cluster of servers that is capable of interacting with all the applications you have. And we built in high availability and disaster recovery. So we suggest deploying, as I said, some clusters behind a load balancer so that your applications can really just talk to our server and not have to worry about much else. So our FIDO server is both open source and certified by the Alliance. So guaranteed to work with any authenticator on the market. What I didn't mention about FIDO is that the best part really is that a lot of the users that you would want to be able to use FIDO already own FIDO authenticators without even really knowing that they do so. So a lot of the more recent Android phones, any Windows PC with Windows Hello capabilities, any MacBook with Touch ID, and a ton of other examples. So this is not something where you have to plan on shipping out little authenticators that look like this to all your users. This is something where they most likely have something in place in their house right now that they can make use of. So as I said, StrongKey is very passionate and very dedicated to the FIDO cause, and we sit on a lot of the working groups that determine where FIDO is going next, but that's not all we do. So we have a long history of data protection and encryption for a ton of other use cases, and that's really given us the ability to put the two together. So we have a FIDO certified server, but it goes much beyond the protocols to protect against vulnerabilities that might creep up depending on how the server is implemented. So we make use of purpose-built cryptographic hardware, either a TPM or an HSM, depending on what you want. And what's important to note here is that, sure, our FIDO server can do everything we talked about for the last 20 minutes, but the StrongKey appliance overall has a FIDO server on it, but also has a lot of other capabilities you can check out on our website that can really help with not only PSD2, but other regulations like GDPR, or even maybe encrypting sensitive data in your organization that's not part of any regulation. And we really wanted to make our server as accessible as possible. That's why it's on GitHub. That's why folks play with it for a long time before they call us and talk about it. Making it easy to integrate was important, and as a result, we've really taken the hard cryptographic work away from our customers and put it behind really simple web services that you could really integrate into your application in a matter of hours. So again, I'd encourage you to check out our GitHub page if this is interesting to you. We really have a ton there that can keep you busy. And obviously running a little short on time here, so I do want to mention that while we talked a lot about FIDO and satisfying these requirements in the web browser, StrongKey is well aware that it's getting more and more common for folks to make purchases from mobile devices, and we have some extremely unique capabilities that are being built right now that we'd love to talk more about if the mobile ecosystem is something that's important to your organization. I'm going to end by pointing you to a couple of resources.